start off reading one from one of you fine people. I believe I have learned a new trick from you. Whenever people have gotten behind on their work, seemingly from having too much to do around here, you give us more to do. Now, not only is this at variance to what ordinary life would say should be done, it actually seems to work. What is going on? If we cannot manage what we already have to do, how can adding more work provide a boost? God damn. That's kind of question. Jesus. But that's back to what I asked you last week. Does anybody know what in the hell's going on here? I noticed nobody answered that. Nobody sent me a note like, well, yes, I do now. And it's a good thing. I want to start off and perhaps even continue the first side of the tape on some very specifics and how some of the things I've been talking about for the last few meetings are tied to quite specifics. And one of them is the area of what I refer to as the triads. And this is so basic to the approach and to our life and time and the way in which life has told me all of this stuff that it'll be returned to again and again and again. There's no way to cover it. There is no beginning. There is no end to it. But I want to bring you back to earth, as it were. Triads. And I start out using this term right quick. I'll point out to you from the world of music. You don't have to know anything about music for this to make any sense, though. But one of the basic harmonic structures in Western music is called a triad. It's three notes. It makes up the basic chord in the chromatic scale. Those of you who know piano, if you were playing a B flat is a B flat and a D and an F. The three notes, that is more or less, I'm not going into any great theory, that is like the basic building block of Western harmony. The triad. All right. Just to tell you that I did get the name, I didn't absolutely make this one up. I have requisitioned it. But now here's what I want to point out to you. And everything that takes place here on planet Earth, in reality as ordinary consciousness can see it, everything is based upon a triad. And, furthermore, ordinary consciousness cannot see it, period. It's not because you're dumb, and it's not because only I know it, and it's not because only secret cults are aware of this. Ordinary consciousness cannot see it. I can make a little sense out of it, enough that if someone was listening to me and trying to follow this as some sort of interesting theory, I could get their mind for a few seconds to go, well, yeah, and that's it. Then they'd forget about it. It just seems to be irrelevant. Everything that takes place, anything that you can be conscious of, every situation, every theory, every occurrence, I don't care if it's as large as world wars, whether it's whole groups of religions and cultures clashing, whether it's you down to a personal level of having a conflict with your parents or with your mate. It is all based on a triad, and ordinary consciousness can only see two things involved, always. Always. And that satisfies, as much as you can be satisfied, that is the basis of everything that happens. Now, the sooner you begin to try and push just your ordinary awareness to the point to realize that what I say is correct, that there is a triad always, that anything, just plug it in, there's no exception, anything, any situation, any occurrence, any relationship, any blah, 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 any noun, any verb, any mass, any energy, is as though it is sitting, resting on, existing on three legs, like a three-legged stool. It is a triad. Always. Now, even theoretically, would you listen to me right quick, that if this be true, and if ordinarily you can only see two, you have gone through life seeing two, your parents only saw two, everybody else only sees two, can you imagine, from this strange viewpoint, from where we are, where you're attempting to be, the pregnant possibilities of what this might unfold, of all of that which seems to be inexplicable, all of that that seems to be self-defeating in your life and humanity's life might be absolutely otherwise, and that's right before your eyes. That is the basis of the triads. In every situation, you already should be doing this yourself. Immediately look at any situation, any blank, fill it in. Circumstance, relationship, thing, noun, verb, mass, energy, blah. You immediately see two legs, two aspects, two notes. And as far as ordinary awareness is concerned, that would seem to be sufficient. There seems to be some sort of tension. There seems to be a kind of reoccurring problem, let us say, between my sexual partner and me. Do we continue to argue over blank, whatever it is, money, over my hobbies? She says I spend too much time with it, and of course there's one leg, but the other leg is the obvious. I don't. And that's it. And we go round and round and round. And we say, well, listen, we're not getting anywhere, let's drop it. We drop it for a week and it pops back up. But all consciousness can see is this. Look out on a greater scale. Why in the world have they torn up the pearl of the Mediterranean and the Muslims and the Christians killing each other in Lebanon? It's not the Muslims and the Christians. That's why it doesn't make sense. There's a third leg to it. There's a third leg to that, and there's a third leg, there's a triad to any conflict apparently between you and one other person. What appears to be the continuing movement in life is as though, I assume all of you have seen these kind of little toys that the companies used to make. One of them used to stick on the wall and it had 4 or 5 or 8 little legs sticking out on strings and suction cups, and you put it on the wall, and the weight of it began to flop over in all kinds of strange directions, run down the wall. It was like a little animal with all its little legs made out of these little slinkies, and it would just flop. And 1 or 2 legs would always be holding it. What appears to be the movements of life, of all types, from volcanoes to you and your sexual partner arguing, is as though, now try and picture this, it's real, and I've got to, of course, simplify it and make it sound sort of funny or cute, but whatever the situation is, the conflict you could look at is there's some sort of little animal, a little thing, look at it as the conflict, the problem, the question. And it's this little thing. Maybe it's cute like a little brown painted bug with little dots on it, little stringy horns. No. But it's got 3 legs to it. If it is alive, the situation, if it is not static, and of course if it's static you lose consciousness of it. It ceases to exist. That is, it's no longer a problem. If it's alive, this thing is moving. And the way it moves is continually like this. Instead of it being on the wall, is at least one of the legs is always raising up and it's flopping over into a slightly different position. It may apparently flop more or less back where it was. It never goes exactly back where it was, by the way. I'm not getting on that tonight. But it can apparently rock back and forth, but it doesn't actually ever rock back exactly where it was, even when it appears to go here, and then back where it was, and then here. That's like you and somebody else arguing, but you never argue in exactly the same place because nothing else, the planets have moved. And now I'm not talking about astrology. You've moved. The humidity has changed. The triads have this going on continually. Now listen, is one of the 3 legs, if the thing's alive, one of the 3 legs is always off the ground. The thing is always in a state of flux. You have, ordinary people do not know this. Once you begin to see it, you have a continuing opportunity to make the thing shift from where it would have been while one of its legs is up. It creates what amounts to, now this is not from an ordinary view, because ordinary people, ordinary consciousness can't even see it, but what it amounts to is you have a split second that there is a vacuum. there is a kind of four-dimensional uncertainty. If you do not do something, what's going to happen is what's going to happen. What's going to happen is the future became the past. The past became the future. That is, nothing changes. You have a split second continually where all triads are changing if they're still alive. And I repeat, if you're aware of it, it's still alive. If it has died, as far as you're concerned, it's the kind of thing that people say, hey, what happened to that woman you had that used to beat you up with a frying pan? You go, gee, what was her name? Oh, it's been years since I've seen you, hadn't it? The guy says, yeah. You say, oh, hell. We woke up, it's been, I don't know, 1981. In other words, you lost consciousness of it. So that affair, that triad, it just stopped. It died. It's a volcano that no longer erupts. It's a river that ran dry. If you are conscious of it, a relationship between you and somebody else, or if you're conscious and inflamed, if you're just conscious of the continuing insanity in Northern Ireland, and for you that triad is alive. That triad is continually in motion. You can change it by knowing that one of the legs of the triad is always off the ground. The first trick is you have got to see that beyond the two legs that everyone can see, you have got to see where the third one is. You have got to see how it exists. That is where the trick is. As a real aside, this is not that important, but sometimes I can't resist giving little four-dimensional history. They're not lessons. I started to say lessons. Rim shots. Does anybody understand what a rim shot is? A little 4D history. How about sniper attack? All right. Those of you who used to read such stuff, the world's religions are full of what, among other things? All right, I'm glad you asked, as long as you're here. The idea of all the gods and the great gods being tripartites. Three gods. Or one god cut up into three. They don't know what to do. It just goes round and round, but all this kind of thing. But then all of them, they always point out that the first two aspects of their god, or the three gods that are actually one god and all that, that two of them are always easy to see, because one of them's always a pretty good guy and no one's kind of a not so good guy. But then they're left with a third one. They're all sure that they got three. And so you get to the third one, and theoretically, philosophically, theologically, then they're confronted with, all right, how do we describe it? What is it we mean? Why do we believe that? And then they'll go, well, we're not sure, but they're sure of this. This one that we don't know about so good. No, not the good guy, the creator, and the bad guy, the destroyer. Them two, everybody can understand, right? And everybody goes, yeah. All right, the third one. The third one, we don't really know what to say except this. It is spooky, and he's not the kind of God to fuck around with. I mean, we're not sure what's going on, but he is really, he's like almost in another, it's like a whole different league. We don't know what to say. It just touches us to tell you that. Just watch it. Be on the lookout. It's really important. And people say, well, why? What does that mean? Nobody knows. They don't even know. I just thought some of you might be interested. That is the basis of what I'm telling you as a, if you got to have it this way, it is a literal, material, physical reality. Forget gods, it is a triad. It is three forces. It is three spots upon which in the 3D world, every situation, every occurrence, every thought, every feeling, every relationship, every noun, every verb, everything of which you can be conscious at the ordinary level is resting on three supports. Always. And you can die and never see it and won't change it. It's still there. But when you begin to see it, when you just try to remember this, what I was begging for you to even try and use your brains theoretically, which I don't normally do, just do you not see the possibility that that might explain, shall we say, a lot? That if everything seems to be supported by two forces, everything seems to be staying on two legs, and if there's actually a third one, just for a split second, you don't have to go any further, but might that not, if not explain a lot, could you just theoretically believe that that might throw a whole new light on everything on which I turn my great gaze of consciousness? some of the things I have been talking about for the last couple of times. Last time we were here, I mentioned metaphysical, and I do assume the examples I used, I do assume that you understood that that was not in any way related, limited to the examples I happened to use that first time, such as TV sets and the repairmen who give it a good swift kick when you leave and how many of them work. I did not use the most blatant example. I kept hinting at it, but I'll go ahead and be blatant. How many times have you people, how many times, I ask rhetorically, have you had a symptom of an ill and you went to the doctor? Gone through all the trouble that I'm sure it is nowadays to get an appointment with a reasonable doctor. Go there, wait around, sit there in those little rooms, read those 2-year-old magazines, be confronted with this horrendous bill that they're going to charge you, and you go in and you tell him, and the guy, bangs around, looks at you and listens, and, does this, and how's the family? It's been a long time since I've seen you. Threatens to take some blood. You see needles. And he gets through and he says, well, you're sound as a dollar. I can't find a thing wrong. And you realize, well, boy, I sure do feel a lot better. And you go out and find out it's $80 or $120 and you pay it. And by God, you're almost, I didn't aware of it. I don't know what happened, but everything's fine. That is metaphysical. Absolutely. Now, the use of this, taking it down to this level, out to this limit, is that you have got to, once you realize this, and by now you should realize it from last week with TV sets and now with this, you should just surely hear what I'm saying, that in ordinary life this happens. People do not recognize it because, to give you one description of it, they can only see 2 possible legs. That is, life in the city is real. It's reasonable. By whose definition? By the binary consciousness. That is, all right, if I go to a doctor, he either helps me or he don't. So nobody takes in consideration. Some of you might be able, since so many of you reacted just then, some of you may be able to hear this. Because this has happened to at least some of you, if not all of you, whether you can remember it, that you kept having some symptom, and you kept putting it off, and you finally called and had to spend 4 or 5 minutes with a secretary setting up an appointment. And you're saying, well, I would really like to be there. And they say, well, it's going to be at least a month. And you say, well, I'm telling you, I've had this symptom. They say, well, all right, if you'll come in at 2:57 on Thursday, we'll slip you in. And it goes through a whole bunch of things. They say, we're going to have to charge you double. And you go, all right. Okay, I appreciate it. And you hang up, and you're cured. Just from going through that, just from making the appointment. All right. See, this is not taking consideration because you would have to understand triads. You would have to be beyond binary consciousness to understand that this is reality. Now, if I tried to use this description with somebody like a psychologist, or even some of you, you might say, well, all that proves is that was a psychosomatic illness. I got news for you. If we're going to play that game, then all illness is psychosomatic except death. And that, I'm just saying that because you can't see it, past the graveyard. It is not psychosomatic. But ordinary consciousness cannot see that this is as real as if I went in with my femur broke and I could see it poked out and they taped it up and put me on a crutch and now I feel better. That is just as real that I got on the phone and it took me 5 minutes to get an appointment and they're going to charge me more, and as soon as I hung up, 30 minutes later, I realized it stopped. And I called up and I said, hey, never mind, I'm all right. Ordinary consciousness cannot conceive of that as being some sort of usable reality. You have got to see that it is, and you've got to see that the way you use that is to cure what appears to be self-ills. It is the cure of unprofitable hobbies. It is the cure of unfit hobbies. It is the bringing of yourself at the lower circuits up to the minimal level of so-called physical health. In the upper circuits, it is bringing you to the minimal threshold level of being conscious, of being able to look around, of not staring, of not believing all the internal voices you've got, of taking the same chemical feeding that goes on in your brain as being the only possible reality. If it is, God, you're in a world of trouble. If it is, then I'm some sort of con man. I hesitate because how could I con you if you were that dumb? What am I conning you with? If that's all you can hear, how can I con you? That almost got me for a second, trying to figure that out. Well, for those newer people here in other places never heard it, that's like the old joke. Of course, it's not funny in the city, but about people worrying about such as this. And they even do it with me. Well, I read one of your books, I heard something about you, I heard you talk, and I might be interested, but I got to tell you the truth. I'm going to level with you. I worry about whether you're going to take me, whether you're a fake. Think about that just for a second. A fake what? That you're going to take me. I'm going to take you. And it seems so real. What if I get taken? I don't stay here too long because I could go on for probably 20 or 30 minutes looking like the little nipper on the old RCA labels of the dog there by the gramophone. I might get taken. And I work on that thinking you might get taken. Might get taken. Of course, I'm refraining from really being sarcastic and pointing out the obvious, which I believe some of you already did for yourselves. All right, I will. It's like, think about most people is to look at them just for a second and think that you might get taken. The thing is like, look, if you hadn't already been taken, you know, if what you are now is not a fair representation of somebody that's been took, you know, I don't know how you think you're going to be in worse shape. Or the other point of worrying about whether I am a fake, when, of course, sometimes I just, whenever I'm going to deal with the public at all, I'm tempted just, all right, let's establish this out front, that I am an absolute fake. And then see if that helps. And then turn it on the people and then go think, all right, at least he's honest. And then let the audience go, then let them go, yeah, but a fake what? Let them do that. All right, back to what I was saying is the way you've got to learn how, in a sense, to use Metavesco yourself is really, you got to listen to this fast. I'll come back to it. We're not stopped here by any means tonight. Self-ills. Now, for the time being, let's separate it from what you call physical illness, because I already told you if you're actually sick, go see a doctor. If you can't figure out how to cure yourself, go see a doctor. So we're not talking about that. We're not talking about actual lower circuit, real ills. That's what I meant by self-ills. That seems to be just the problems of being alive, being a human, whatever you attribute your problems to, your upbringing, whatever it is, your sex, your weight, your height, your color, your religion, whatever it was. Those, the treatment, let's not talk about cure really. I'll get into that some other time as to why, but just the treatment begins with this, is to understand that there is a continuing reality as much as I said, of setting a broken leg, patching up a rash, of using Metavesco to investigate that you would have never looked at on the basis that just investigation, just scrutiny of this, just looking into it, can have an effect. Salubrious to the point that it appears many times to be a cure. That is, it just seems that that's the end of it. One way to look at this is that you are examining that the partnership doesn't want to talk about. It is that which the partnership does not want to deal with on the basis that it can be treated. As long as I'm here, let's go back to the prevailing Western wisdom right now of the idea that there is a dual level of consciousness springing from the Freudian era into whatever they would be referring to it, but the idea of there being an unconscious going on now. Let me give you another description of that, of what they've been trying to get at. They're getting closer and closer to what I'm talking about throughout the years. But you can look at what is now referred to and believed to be the unconscious. Obviously, you should already picked up from my kind of descriptions. At a very minimal level, very basic level, you are talking about the older nonverbal circuits in man. But that should be pretty obvious to you. But what I wanted to bring it up to is on the basis of the partnership. Is you could look at the so-called unconscious of there being motivations that people swear, educated people, just the plant's full of them that say, I do things and I have no idea why. That it is down in my subconscious. I am not conscious of certain drives in me personally that do not seem to be perhaps all the time profitable, blah, blah, blah. Besides it being based upon physically the older nonverbal circuits and now their interpretation for other purposes through the upper circuits, those that are verbal, the other thing I want you to see is you could also look at the belief, the feeling that there is an unconscious, as it is the side at any particular time of the partnership. In other words, you seem to be one, and then there's this other thing. It's the other side of the partnership at that time that you don't want to hear about. That's the side at any particular time that has the self-ills. That is the side that cannot be passed over without scrutiny. That there is nothing holy about it, there is nothing sacred about it, and there is certainly nothing irretrievable. It is not locked away in some dark, dank mine, M-I-N-E, in your mind, M-I-N-D. It is not something requiring, even if this worked, which they, I hear tell now that they admit they don't, so their new battle cry is an analysis. Can't bring it out. Which there's the city. If you ever think that you're better than the city, forget it. Something doesn't work, and they finally come around to hollering it doesn't work. They establish a new day, that the day we discovered it didn't work, and they have parades. At any rate, even when they believed it worked, even when they believed it worked, it was like, well, you got to come here 3 hours a week, maybe for 20 years. It is not that there is some unconscious mind that is beyond reach. I am telling you, it is as close as this. It is as close as you are a partnership. Everybody should feel that, even if you didn't like my original terms or it through you. You and somebody else is in this business, in you. There's no doubt about that. You can't argue that. You may have voices in you. You may still be wired up that you're still hearing your old descriptions. But there's no doubt you are in a partnership. Everybody, 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 everywhere, everywhere, everybody, everywhere, everybody is a partnership. You look at them, and it's a partnership. It's Smith and Jones. Some people, I guess, they're half shot Smith and Wesson. But, and then in you, try and get away from all the old descriptions you had. There is a partnership in you. In you, in you, in you. What ordinary people now refer to as unconscious, can you see that at any particular time, take my description, you should be able to feel it. But as you begin to see it, it is not some far removed, unconscious pool brought about by your upbringing. It is that every human is a natural partnership. It's like you're born with the partnership papers. You're born a partnership. It's you and the other guy. It's you and Smith. Sometimes it's you and Jones. It's according to who's on the phone. You remember that? It's how you handle the people that call in. It's sometimes you're Smith, sometimes you're Jones. It's according to what they want. Who's there? Is this Smith and Jones? Yeah, this is Smith and Jones. What do you want? Well, who's this speaking? Well, no, you tell me first what is it you want. And then you decide, apparently, whether you're Smith or Jones. All right. What seems to be the unconscious at any given time, what I was trying to tell you, is simply this. It's not that far away. It's in the next room. It's right next to you. You're sitting at the desk on the phone. It is the aspect of the partnership at any time that you don't want to hear about. That's this great unconscious, the subconscious. It's right there with you. It's not this game of, well, I'm Smith, but if we're going to use your terminology, then Jones is my unconscious. And it's come about, it's taken me 30 years of all kinds of bruises and traumas and things happening to me that built up this persona that is beyond the grasp of my conscious mind, And it's not. So you're saying, well, I'm Smith now talking, so Jones is my unconscious, to use your terms. You know, you're just full of ignorance. Because 2 minutes ago, you were Jones. And you were bad-mouthing Smith. And now you're Smith and you're bad-mouthing Jones. And you're saying, I can't get to him, he makes me do this stuff. You can use Medivesco simply on this basis to begin with. To what everyone else calls their unconscious, or what your forefathers would call demons. The devil made me do it. And who knows what made me do it? I'll tell you what made you do it. It was either Smith or Jones. It's according to whoever I'm talking to now. All you got to do is tell me who you are. And if you say, right now I'm Smith, all right, Jones made you do it. And if you go to the bathroom and come back and say, well, and I say, wait a minute, who are you now? And you say, well, I'm Jones. I say, well, Smith made you do it. That's it. There's nowhere else to look. I mean, he went with you to the bathroom. You come back 2 minutes later, and now instead of Smith, you're Jones. You're going to tell me, well, I need to go back to analysis if I had the money. I really feel like I was making progress. How long were you there? Well, I was going on my 12th year, but I really felt like I was getting somewhere. All you got to do is walk out of the room. Well, when you get real good, you don't have to walk out of the room. All you do is real quick. I can't do this because I can't. If I can move this quick, you can't see it because your eyes won't move. To do that, and you turn and look at you. You don't have to look down somewhere for an unconscious. Smith is staying right here next to you. He's talking to you. Or, if it's not Smith, it's Jones. Metaphysical is used in the beginning to look at that which the other partner doesn't want to deal with. Doesn't want to hear about it, doesn't want to talk about it. He's off on lunch break. He always is. If you're Smith right now, then Jones is out of the office. He's taking a nap. He's irritable. He's drunk. He's hungover. Out in the ordinary world in the city, one of the first times I recall, or one of the times I recall hearing this from ordinary people or reading it, was in the world of the military, warfare, of men trying to point out the danger, but now let me pull it into all possible organizations. Remember, organizations being humans, corporations, people. But in the area of warfare was them pointing out the danger of the generals, that is, the planners getting too far removed from the actual battlefield. That is, that they would fail to see the possible consequences of the decisions they made. Now, you could say that also, it would be whole true. I'm sure somebody probably has said it now I think about it in the world of business, that you cannot have in the corporate structure the upper echelons of General Motors or Xerox being so far removed, up there making the plans, so far removed from what is actually going on down in the marketplace, the sales force. If they're making decisions too far removed from where the action actually takes place, then grave negative consequences can be the result. I'm not arguing with that. It's just a good spot to take it because it's another city, two-dimensional reflection of something else. I assume all of you follow this. In the world of politics, it goes on all the time. They'll have a bunch of thinkers, blue ribbon committees, that will work for years to come out with a report about what to do. What we should do about the poverty in Mississippi. And so this great committee will be appointed to meet in Washington or New York City, and they'll meet for 2 or 3 years in downtown Manhattan or inside the Beltway in Washington, and they will put out this big old 2,000-page, and they will hurl it out to Mississippi. And the people of Mississippi get it. The people that, in other words, are supposed to implement, they're supposed to take the action based upon the thinking of action that somebody else did. And they go, this has got no relationship to what the hell is going on. Of course, it's got nothing to do with Mississippi and New York. I'm just pointing out that constantly in the apparent political arena is people making decisions for another group of people. Now, does this sound familiar? We're talking about action and thinking of action. That one group is thinking of action, and then they give their plan, which is still thinking of action, to those that have got to execute it. The generals that would love to, of course, be right there on the battlefield, but a couple of them had bad colds, and so they had to, stay 50 miles back. And so they sit there on these boards, and they move things around, and they talk, and they drink a little brandy, and they decide what should be done 50 miles up in the front. It has been pointed out, not to a great deal of avail for those of you who read history, that there are possible negative consequences to this of having the decision makers, that is, those thinking of action, too far removed from those who must execute it. Of course, they've been saying that for thousands of years. All right, now, down to where it may have some pertinence to us, to you. Do you see that this is absolutely true with a individual human attempting to do this? But now look at it on the basis of the great separation between the lower, older nonverbal circuits and the younger, newer verbal circuits, who, if I'm going to use this kind of city binary division, it's the upper circuits that would be primarily in charge of TOA, thinking of action, and then it's the lower circuits that have got to execute the action. And so you've got this, at least some division, at least you got, let's say, from here to here. Or at least from here to here, maybe. At least from here to here. You've got a division that apparently there is one group that is in charge of decision making, of planning, of thinking of action. And then is having to send out their decision to those who must execute it. As I start out this paragraph, I had heard it or read it noted through ordinary sources that if the distance is too great between the generals, between the planners, and those who must execute it, there can be grave consequences arise that no one foresees. As I was saying, some of you laughed. I said it's never, even though it's been pointed out, it hasn't had any great effect on history. Look at it as being individual people. It's never had any effect on individual people. But for a would-be revolutionist, you have got to bring these two elements, in a sense, unnaturally together. You've got to bring them together as close as is possible. It's not a matter of, as they would say in the city, of the distance between the planners and those who must take action being too great. From the revolutionary view, if they're a distance at all, it's too much. That you've got to bring them as close as possible to where the ideas of thinking of action and the whole idea of action are as close as possible. And at times they can be so close that they're interchangeable. They can be so close that it's no longer a matter that I've got to think what to do. But it's no longer looked at the other way, a matter of I do things, and then I got to stop and think, why did I do that? Or I should have done that differently. Or now that I've done that, ooh, it makes my upper circuits feel bad. They say, you shouldn't have done that. All right, I won't do that next time. And then on some real warm days when everything's just right, you get a flash that, ooh, I've been through this before. I said that before. It's deja vu all over again. Yogi Berra used to get laughs with that. You have got to bring what appears to be the generals and the infantry, those parts of the human organization that think of action, and then those that apparently do action with no thinking of it. You've got to bring them as close together. You've got to bring Jackson, Mississippi and Washington, D.C. face to face. You have got to bring the lower circuits as close as you can in action, in reality, to the talking upper circuits. You have then cut down, to use their descriptions, which I won't argue with because I can use it, you have cut down upon the possibility of unforeseen circumstances, of consequences arising, as they would say, of which no one had any foresight. Well, if you get the two together, if you can get them just almost together, you don't need foresight. You don't need foresight and you don't need hindsight, because you would not do anything that you regretted doing. Nor would you fail to do something and regret having not done it. Do you understand? You understand the difference? If you've got the generals not 50 miles behind the battle lines, you've got them right up next to the trenches. You've got the general standing next to the infantry. You have got the CEO of General Motors standing down at the assembly line. You have got the head politician. You've got the tyrant. You've got the president, the prime minister, the king standing next to the people. Next to them. There is a there is a direct effect, when you have some awareness of this, of the way the triads move in you. You have cut down upon the lapse time as a triad moves, that you're not waiting for information from afar. What seems to be the natural planning that would be necessary for a human, the time, the lag time, the feeling that I must make plans is open to a great deal of further interpretation. May I put it to you that way? Or one way I put it in the past that some people seem to like for a few seconds before you actually let it fall back in the hands of ordinary consciousness, that is, and then you really think about it. And that is, and this can be seen, some of you can just get a whiff of it whenever I say it, that it doesn't really matter much what you plan, does it? And yet to understand the way things work, you've got to continue to plan. But a real revolutionist understands that no matter what he plans, it has almost no effect. It almost comes into no play as to what he actually does, but you can't leave it there, but he has still got the plan. What you have affected directly, insofar as the triads and being able to change things, is to bring what appears to be the seat of planning as close as possible to what appears to be the centers of activity where the plans must be executed, and to bring them as close as possible, to bring them to where they're perhaps even almost one. I say it's open to further interpretation. How about another side? Everybody out in the world seems to have some faith, at least verbal faith, in the idea of intuition, cha-cha-cha, etc., etc. The belief that in some way people at times have flashes and they just know what to do. What if it's not just a flash? For them it's just a flash. But what if there is a literal reality to it? It's unnatural. It's why it's looked at as a passing thing. But what they're describing when they say intuition, ordinary people, what are they describing? About them knowing. They're describing, well, I knew what to do. I didn't even think about it. I just did it. I just knew it was right. Boy, if that isn't mystical. But no one, notice this also, this includes you at the ordinary level, no one has ever operated on the basis of their so-called intuition and ever regretted it. You never hear that. I suddenly felt, well, I must do so-and-so, and it just seemed insane later, but I did it, and they got nothing else to say. It's just, I just knew what to do, and that was it. Boy, it'd be horrible to live that way all the time, wouldn't it? Jesus. That'd give you folks the willies to think about that. You mean you just do stuff and that's it? Now, Martha, the man's talking in goddamn parables again. Let's see if we can round in some more of the little doggies. How about the magic of the talking paper? You remember my example of banker running through piles of mortgages, and some of them are, he's going through old files. Maybe they just merged with this bank, and he's sitting there going through them, and many of them's already been paid off, and they've never been filed away correctly. And just every now and then his little face lights up. The blood rushes to his little cheeks, and his little fat fingers get all excited. Ooh, here's one that's still active. In fact, he looks down, and it was back, it's at 19%. All right. And I always threw out to you that that's proof that paper is alive. The people believe that all kinds of things are not alive. And I was pointing out to you that everything is alive. The apparent plus between I plus not I is alive. That this is not empty space. There is no such thing. It's not dead space. It's just not. Let me expand on that a bit. I also have heard in our lifetime such descriptions as that humanity must learn to, must take information and be able to use the information to produce new energy. To use information to produce energy. This is so simple, you would think. Of course, it's easy for you to think when I point it out. I go through all these gyrations and jokes and make you get a glimpse of it and you go, yeah. It's not a matter of using information to produce energy. Information is energy. So, we can say that it is kind of funny that I have misdirected you for me to swear for 2 times in a row that a piece of paper is alive just because he looked at that mortgage. But information is alive. Information is energy. It's not theoretical. It's not metaphysical. And it is so obvious once you get a glimpse of it. I shouldn't have to stay with this because all of this is so obvious to a few people. But let's take my example of the banker or anybody. You're sitting there reading through the paper. And if we were watching you on a hidden camera, reading through a book, just periodically, you come alive. The light bounces off the paper, off the ink. Something goes in and gets into your eyes. And something happens to you, and then it's back to, and you're reading. All right, rather than say that simply that the paper is alive, which I'm not backing off of that. Let's talk about, before I even go further with the energy, how about this? If we ask somebody to explain, how is it you explain that here's a person we're observing from a hidden view, and how is it that they're reading something we gave them? A stack of papers, mortgages, a book, a newspaper, a stack of little ideas that we put in a little booklet for them, and watch them. You see their eyes moving, they're reading that page, and they turn a page, and they get to another page, and just periodically something happens. And then they're back to this. What is going on here? How do you explain that one piece of paper, one mortgage, makes this man get animated? And you could even have him hooked up until his respiration increases, his brain waves change. When he looks down, and all it says, he looks down at the dates, and he sees this mortgage is still active. And something happens, and he goes to a whole bunch of them that's already been paid off. His blood pressure drops. The brain waves change. All right, what if we ask some people? What if we ask a religious person? What's going on here? Then they could explain. Their explanation would be, all right, what we've got here is a matter of greed. We've got an example of greed in action. Ask a psychologist what's going on. They could say, well, this is a perfect example of an unconscious drive in this man to exert power over his father. You could ask, you could have a politico there observing. You ask them what happened. They could say, this is a living example of the class struggle. That's it. You could have a hard scientist, that is a man involved with the hard sciences. And you could have him observe this and ask him the question, what's going on? How can you explain that a man apparently is affected by a piece of paper with certain, that the ink is arranged in different figures on one piece and another, and it seems to change him? And a scientist, an archetypical scientist, would say, that is beyond my field. I don't know, I got no interest. It's just, it's a non-question. It's non-scientific. In other words, nobody can answer that. Now, they would give the explanations. I about covered it that I just gave you from religious, psychological, but you should realize, but now that doesn't tell you anything. It apparently does. That's one reason that some of you laughed and you didn't know it when I said the psychologist could say, well, what is animating this man about some of these mortgages on people's homes still being active and they still pay it and some of them don't, it's a kind of unconscious desire in many men, especially those that seek power, which bankers are a prime example. They're the kinds of ones who are unconsciously still involved with an unconscious power struggle with their father. And of course, them now having an active mortgage over another human, another man, chances are 99% certain that the mortgage, if it's still active and is that old, it was in a man's name, and there he sits and he has got a kind of undeniable power over this other man's life. And of course, all of the men represent his father. And a whole bunch of you laughed when I said that, because out in the world, out in the city nowadays, you could tell that to many, 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 many people, including you if you hadn't met me, and people go, yeah, all right. But it is not an explanation. That, my friends, is simply an explanation. That is not an explanation. I, and I alone, am explaining to you. I've got a real explanation. Literal, physical, material. Information is energy. It is just not recognized as such. And they're playing around, as always, on this kind of information that life puts out at times. Everything is right behind us, right behind me. They're getting closer and closer, bits and pieces. The computer aids, they're all but up to this point. But in a sense, to be all but is the kind of distance that may only be from here to here, between the planners and the executors, for me to use an individual person. But it might as well be light years with ordinary people. And so for me to say that the city is real close behind me, I'm just pointing out that there are bits and pieces of this that you should be able to hear is going on already, but not directly at it. Not simply that information is energy, period. Not information can be turned into energy, information can be used or not. It's that some kinds of information, I guess, paradigmatically could be said to be a kind of energy. Information is energy. Once you begin to see that, then whole areas that other people think of as being spiritual, psychological, inexplicable, or worse yet, occult, metaphysical, spooky. It's just that they are third leg blind. They are absolutely blinded to the fact that there is no such thing as a non-physical anything. That if you can read, if you can hear, if you can think, it is all dependent upon what they are already calling, and always have called, the physical senses. If they believe that they're hearing the voice of gods, if they believe that they're seeing flying saucers, if they believe that they're seeing the Virgin Mary or her sister who's been around the block, if they believe they're seeing gods, if they believe that they are hearing people from other planets, if they do, it is still all dependent upon the senses. It is going through the circuits. If God is talking to them, there is no shortcut. There is no way that the gods can talk to you outside the circuits in you now. The gods have got to talk to you either audibly. You go, yeah, I hear it. Or they got to talk to you in here. It is information. Then the question becomes, once you see it, what information is useful? What information produces energy in me that is profitable to satisfying me in my lifetime? And other than this, I hate to tell you the obvious, you should be able to see it now in hindsight real quick, just real quick. There has been none. That's the way life is arranged. There is no information in the city. There is no information from any ordinary source that will turn into energy that will satisfy the certain people, the few certain people that end up here with the likes of me. There is no information out there that will turn into that kind of energy. I'm about to run out of tape and time, but let me right quick. Just talking about paper is not the end of it. Talk is energy. Talk is a kind of magic even. But let me tell you, let me point to how ordinary people use it. Back in the city, that is you, at that level, the way people use the energy of talk, the potential magic of talk, is people want to use it on each other. And they use it, in a sense, what it amounts to is like a solo sex act that you're doing publicly. It's all messy and it gets all over you. And it has no lasting effect. It's not as satisfying as sex normally should be. Now, wait a second. All of you, I don't think, heard that. I like the description. It's like you engaging in, as your forefathers used to call it, private vices, indulging them publicly. And it gets all over your hands, and you get all sticky and messy, and it has no lasting effect. And that's the way people attempt to use this energy of talk on other people. The revolutionist has got to use it on himself, because talk is energy. But then notice, before you think you're choking some of you newer people, that you have not improperly thought that, in a sense, I badmouth excessive talk. And those of you that are listening a certain way, you may be suspect that by and large I've been badmouthing talk. The potential magic of talk, and I remind you again now, I pointed out, I started out this sub-paragraph, talk is energy. We don't have to use just the banker looking at the figures on paper. Talk is energy. Energy. Because it is conveying information. Now, don't get judgmental about, well, I don't know whether the information is valid or not. If you hung up there, you're the kind that believe you might be a fake and I might get took. Energy is energy. Information is information on the basis that you've got to see it. The revolutionist has got to use the magic, the potential magic of talk, the energy of talk itself on himself. On himself, not on other people, on himself. But he's got to use it in a silent, in a secret, and in a personal way that has to do with one thing and one thing only, and that is the evolution of himself. Not the apparent change of somebody else. And worse yet, not apparently, well, I'm going to have to speak up. Perhaps I can help these people. Well, you sure don't belong here. No, the world needs you. The city needs you. Don't let me hold you here. I should not be wasting even a moment of your precious time. You get right out there and you help them. God knows they need it. God knows God needs it. It is a secret use, but there is magic in words, but you have got to know how to use it in such ways. Now get ready. You can't deal with binary consciousness, what I'm about to point out, the good old thing, in such ways as a revolutionist does not talk to himself about what he's doing. Well, that sure doesn't fit. You can't make that fit with what I just said, or you can't with binary consciousness. But there is magic in words. But there is magic in not using words in the ordinary way. The energy is spent. You have gotten it all over your hands and got yourself sticky by talking to yourself. Well, I sure am glad I've decided to do so-and-so. I sure do feel better since I quit doing so-and-so. Or, boy, I'm so proud of me that I did such and such. The communication between the planners and the executioners are being extended. There are grave consequences awaiting you. You know what they are? Grave consequences. You're going to stay just like you are. That's the grave consequences. You're going to stay just like you are. Continuing to talk about, well, I'm going to change tomorrow. Or worse yet, boy, I'm glad I've changed. Talk has almost nothing to do with it. 2, 3, 4. All right. Talk has nothing to do with it. That's why it's known in the comedy biz as pacing. To give you time to work on one of them soon. 3, 4. Talk has nothing to do with it the way you use talk. The way everyone uses talk. It is like energy just being splattered. It is like a solo, secret private sex act that you now are doing in public. And it just splatters, at least if you're a man. It just shoots out and it splatters, and it really does no lasting good, and all you do is get yourself sticky and messy, maybe it hits a few other people. That is not magic. It does not change things. It does not get anybody pregnant, for one thing. It does not get you pregnant. You people out of town, and you people here, you and your people, if I've never said this, anytime you ever write me anything that you've got any kind of interest in, just anything at all, poetry, notes, anything, keep copies of it yourself. Anything that you like at all to write down enough, I don't mean reporting on some excursion to me, but anything that you wrote down that you liked at all, enough really to write me, you ought to keep a copy of it. I've got 3 excursions. Are you ready? One is, and you people out of town that are now part of the continuing group there, if you take yourself seriously involved with this, you people out of town drop me a note, and then you people here turn it in next time we meet. Simply on a little piece of paper that we normally use, I want you to write me down your greatest fear. Fear, greatest fear. No apologies, don't worry about where it came from. Just when you hear that, if you're just back at ordinary consciousness, and I say, just tell me, up until now, and right now under ordinary circumstance, what is your greatest fear? Just write it down on a piece of paper. Chin up, little chest out, be brave, just write it down. The second one is, the new people, by the way, you didn't get, I didn't use this by the time you got here about abandoning exposure to advertising. Were you here when I gave that one out?
14 days.
Yeah, okay. You people out of town then, I don't know whether this made it on the tape, you people in other groups that consider yourself serious, etc. I don't know whether this got on the tape that you saw when I did this, but I want you out of towners for 14 days after you hear this, I want you to cut yourself off in all possible ways from being aware of advertising. If you're watching TV, turn off the volume, hit the remote every time an ad comes on. When you're reading magazines and you get to the point that has an ad, don't look at it as being a fight against evil or a fight against some conspiracy. Just do what I'm telling you to do for 14 days. Do not look at an ad. Do not pick up the newspaper and there it is, Macy's, once a year sale. Just do not turn it. Go ahead and read the news, read the comics, the sports, wherever you read, but do not read willfully. Do not consciously read any ad, look at an ad. Do not look at billboards when you're driving down the freeway the way you go to work, and suddenly you can tell colors and pictures, and there's a semi-nude woman up there, a brand new billboard. Don't you look. Wait until after 14 days and then look. All right, that's for you people out of town. That's your second one. Now back to the third one for everybody, including you here. I want you to do something between now and the next time we meet, if possible, if not within the next week. I want you to go into a store, go out to a nice shopping mall, go into a store, and I want you to go up to a clerk, specifically, go up to a clerk and catch them when they got a second there, and do this little act. I want you to give them a very profuse, a warm, I want you to try and feel the heat and excitement yourself, to actually pull an act, to sincerely and in a real active way, to thank them for a kindness which they've never done to you, but which you remind them of. That, for instance, here the basis is a miss or sir, who it is. Say, I'll bet you don't remember. But because I guess it's been, let's see, several months ago. But at any rate, and I know you're busy, but I had a complaint about something I bought here, just whatever kind of store it is, it doesn't matter whatever department. And I came back and I really was angry about it, and anyway, I was kind of raised hell with you. I don't know whether you remember or not. But anyway, the point is, right quick I want to get to, is since then, the way you acted, it is so rare to have someone be as understanding, as kind, as tolerant, because I really went off the deep end after it's over. I realized that I was out of line. But I'll tell you, I have really been touched. I've thought about you constantly because you were so kind, you were so understanding. You hardly ever have that happen in life. But maybe just touch their little arm and say, I want to tell you, that's really meant something. As strange as that may sound, we're an argument over a pillowcase or whatever it is you tell them, or a dress. But your kindness, your attitude, the tolerance you had, literally has stayed with me like, I guess, sermons or a piece of nice poetry does to some people. I just wanted to tell you that, miss, that, gee. Keep the look method in mind and do this. I'm not going to tell you anything else, just do it. Don't drag it out much further than I did. Give them a smile, but generate some energy through the information you're giving them that never occurred. It's false information, if we want to look at it from a city view. But do it. Just more or less the way I said it.